Welcome back to Bleach Revisited. I am Carker Gold, your host through this entire rereading of the Bleach series. As always, these videos are divided into 3 parts, so if any of those other parts interest you more, feel free to hop around. But, without further ado, let's hop into this reading of Chapter 30 of the Bleach manga, Second Contact. It was beyond the scope of our understanding. Vroom! Boom! I shot you down. No way, you missed, cheater. Don Kanoji was suddenly thrown back with tremendous force. Ah! Shut up, you guys. I can't hear the TV. The TV's too loud. Hey, what was that? Bleach. Chapter 30, Second Contact. It was beyond the scope of our understanding. May I offer you something to eat? No, thanks, mister. He disappeared? I thought he was going to turn into a hollow. Hey, what just happened? Just after Don Kanoji was thrown back, there was a tremendous explosion. Is Don Kanoji all right? Yeah! Mission accomplished! Wow! He's alive! Incredibly, Don Kanoji is unharmed! And he shouted, Mission accomplished! That can only mean the cleansing was a success! Are you serious? Did that actually do the job? No. It didn't pass on. A hole vaporizes the instant it becomes a hollow, and recomposes in a new location. If the hole is a floating Fuyu spirit, it could be anywhere. It could reappear a long way from here. If the hole had some kind of regrets in its heart, that location would be... Kanonji! 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 Okay, thank you very much. I'm getting a real sweet vibe from you babies. You're awesome. Hey, you sure you cleansed that guy? Of course. Don't you know who I am? I am the new century's premier spiritualist, Don Kanonji. Those I cleanse stay cleansed, son. You're a floating spirit too, aren't you? Don't worry, I'll cleanse you later, free of charge. Above you, Ichigo! Look up! What? Oh. It turned into a hollow. What? What is that creature? Huh? You don't know what a hollow is? You've never seen one? Of course I have! Don't you know who I am? I am the new century's premier spiritualist, Don Kanonji. But monster extermination is outside of my specialty. That's called a hollow. It's when a soul... Whoa! I smell it. I smell it. The powerful stench of a super dangerous spirit. Could he be a demon come to avenge the other spirit? That's not it. You should try listening to the very end when someone's explaining. Oh, well, forget it. I can't breathe. 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 Feed me a soul. Here it comes. Run, Kananch. Run, my boy. Leave this to me. What? Come, spirit of evil. The new century's premier spiritualist, Don Kanoji, will be your opponent. What are you doing? You idiot! Boy, why didn't you run, boy? Look, mister, it's you who'd better run. Me run? How dare you? I will not run. I cannot run away, boy. You can't run away? Why not? Ichigo? What is that blurry shape? Just as I thought. Incredible. But it's terrible. So, what will you do now? There she is! Over there! Get her! Darn, they heard me shout! And that is it for Chapter 30 of Bleach. Pretty spicy chapter as we get this hollow appearing and a little bit of the fight with it. But let's get right into analyzing the art and the narrative of the chapter, as well as giving my own personal response to it. So we immediately hop into this scene with these characters that we actually don't know, and the whole purpose of this is to, I spoke about a little bit before last week about how, we consider writing for the weekly format and how to kind of, you have a week of time between those moments. So I think this especially kind of makes use of perhaps that format. And it works in the collected volume too, because you're turning to this new chapter. You're in this very exciting moment, and you come to, you don't know what's really going on here, but very quickly we get reminded in the second panel that there are a lot of people watching this on TV, right? And I think this is really effective because it establishes that huge explosion that happened from the Demi Hollow, right? Kind of exploding out after he was completely hollowified, um, before he recomposes. That moment is actually something that is there for mundane regular people as well. So that explosion happened for like everybody, which is kind of neat. So this is a good way of showing that in a way that wouldn't maybe even be clear with people that weren't the TV audiences. So and I like that it shows specifically with these characters that are, completely new, that we don't have any other connection to. Anyway, we hop to our title, like the 30 on his collar there, and he's got bird feet. Always kind of interesting kind of outfit designs. You really get the idea that maybe Kubo wanted to be a fashion or clothing designer in a way, from a lot of these covers. But I think in a lot of ways that sort of also sells the urban aesthetic of the series. So I think one of the really strong things that Bleach has going for it, especially compared to its contemporaries, which were all much higher fantasy, right? I mean, Naruto is a bit of a strange sort of magical urban setting, but I mean, One Piece is absolutely this kind of high seas fantasy where every island can be drastically different. And so Bleach, especially taking place very specifically in early 2000s Tokyo, like it is real world place and setting, and it tries to evoke that sense of urban atmosphere. We're talking about, graphic tees the other episode too, and I was thinking about how much that is such a 2000s sort of phenomenon. I guess, with the ease of printing those sorts of shirts, it really caught on throughout. I mean, like obviously earlier on, but like 80s had a lot of kind of prints on shirts, things like that. But really, the sort of shirts that had like text on them was like a 90s and 2000s sort of thing. Uh, you know, the early aughts, as they say. Anyway, it was an interesting time to grow up. Notably, it'll give even more personal context. I started Bleach in 2004. This was right before starting high school because I must have started high school 2005. So, yeah, a little bit of context. Bleach has been with me through my adolescence, teenage years, and through my college years as well, which is interesting and resonant. And it's been, like I said, over 5 years since the series ended, closer on 7. Anyway, so it's interesting to think that like I was the target demographic for Bleach, and so I want to provide maybe a couple of insights into that and how this resonated with me in those ways then, and then also how it kind of hits me now, which I've given a little bit of that throughout this series, but hopefully I'll give a little bit more of that in my personal response. I try to keep my own context maybe divorced a little bit too much, but the response section of these videos is really meant to, give a little bit more of how this has personally sort of resonated with me, both in the past and now as an adult. Anyway, but yeah, I think this is really cool. Hopping back, we got that sort of first person shot and that disorientation of the sort of angled planes in the previous chapter, and we get that again here as we're trying to make sense of what's going on. The kind of fragments of chains whittling away in the air. It's really neat. I also like this kind of swept circle of smoke is cool before it dissipates. And it's of course I like that we have aligned here both Ichigo as well as the completely mundane kind of announcer guy. Both of them aren't sure what's going on. What just happened. We get affirmation of what everybody else saw, of course, and then we get Don Kanoji completely misreading the situation. Uh, yeah, yeah. And moving forward, we get these very kind of, I like that Ichigo asks that did the job, and we get a very serious looking Kisuke. So, like, answers us without even having to use any sort of text. We finally get the no kind of halfway through the page here as Rukia reflects on sort of what's going on there. Pulls out her phone. Like that we have this guy like drinking water. It's interesting to look at like what all the other characters are doing here. These sort of backgrounded ones. This chant starts up, and I like that. It doesn't get brought up, but I love that Don Kanoji is having this very casual sort of conversation with Ichigo, which he assumes is just another floating ghost, right? And that he'll cleanse him later. It's kind of neat to think about exactly where Don Kanoji is coming from. Like what his understanding of the spiritual world is, at anything. I really like this like look up, and then this is a great bit of where we get both of the characters, and I like how we get to see both of them look up, and of course we get to look up as well. Moment of kind of identification, and I love the way that this page plays out with the hollow forming. You can see the bone in its arms kind of getting melded, like the finger. I love that, like this kind of idea of it materializing and kind of wrapping itself all together out of thin air. That recomposition just really works visually, I feel. And we get a good bit of that throughout this as they try to make heads or tails of what they're seeing. Yeah, this big kind of sucking into place. The hole obviously gets formed. And we're anticipating, of course, the head on it, right? As we know, hollows are kind of defined by their very iconic mask. So we have even that sort of visual. Obviously, we see the hole. We're clearly waiting for the mask ourselves, and I love this shot of both Ichigo and Don Kanoji, especially the way that this kind of zooms in, and we get a little bit of shock from both of them. And we're curious to see what they're seeing, of course, and so as we turn the page, we get this little kind of drop into this head gushing out of it. And it's like this human head on this monstrous entity. And then, this is really kind of a wild moment as he like screams into both the whites of his eyes as well as his teeth kind of exploding out, forming that white bone of the mask, which is kind of wild. You know, because I always say I really like the visual of having like the extra the regular kind of Hollow's mouth underneath the mask mouth that always forms. But yeah, I like that we get that as it's taking kind of shape, flying back and then forming out, and then we get this Hollow here, which as far as Hollow designs go, it's all right. I think this one usually just gets referred to as Demi Hollow in other like text and media, which uh, is weird because I feel like the idea of any plus getting referred to as a Demi Hollow before it becomes a Hollow, is the idea. So I don't know that Demi Hollow really is this thing's official name. I would imagine its name would fall much more in line with the other names that we've gotten so far. Anyway, we get. I love this. This page has a gag that I really enjoy here, but also really telling kind of interaction. And we talked before about the straight man kind of comedy bit and how Ichigo plays that, but I love Ichigo, being like, "What, you don't even know what a hollow is?" And he's gonna sort of twist it. Of course, I know what a hollow is. Don't you know who I am? I'm Dankanoji. And he would go on to do this. I immediately, like, again, right? Doesn't he? Maybe he already did that earlier, and I'm losing my mind. Yeah, he must have already done that earlier. This is the second bit on that, perhaps. So, but yeah, that kind of reassertion. Yeah, I think that must have happened before the Hollow. Yeah, just like, hey, you sure you cleanse that guy? He's like, yeah, don't you know who I am? I'm the New Century's premier spiritualist, Dankanoji. So like that's sort of Ichigo questioning Dankanoji, and then Dankanoji really trying to reaffirm his identity and that he's like really in control is interesting. I think that especially that's one of the things that kind of builds interestingly for both of these characters is Don Kanoji is very much this person that's not going to admit his shortcomings immediately, but also wants to exude a sense of control over the situation. That he doesn't want these other people to panic. But yeah, I love that he puts up his hands to like on the other sides of his ears, and he says that he's smelling the stench of the spirit, which is pretty insane. Maybe that's more about the sense of synesthesia that we got in the previous chapter title. Who knows? Anyway, but it makes perfect sense that Dankanoji wouldn't realize that this is the same creature, right? This is the same human. It's such a different entity to him that he thinks it's a demon come to eventually their spirit. Uh, and again, we get that kind of structure here of a moment of levity being played against a moment of seriousness to kind of give it a bit of punctuation before it hops into literally this encounter, which yeah, I love the way that this kind of has this springing down momentum, literally down page. Ichigo kind of right to left, here it comes, getting ready, and then I love that he expresses, again, we get so much of like the expectation of things reading right to left, so the sort of antagonistic behavior working from left to right as Don Kanoji thrusts up from the left side of the page to throw Ichigo out of the way and to have his own heroic moments. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I like that, of course. Ichigo finds this guy to be completely insufferable and can't even imagine Dankanoji doing battle with a Hollow. Because, I mean, who could, right? I love that he immediately catches the thing's blade catches its bite with his blade. This is really great panel for me, especially like this Hollow kind of attacking from right to left. and then Ichigo jumping in to kind of interpose himself between Don Kanoji and this threat. Really effectively kind of drawn speed lines here, especially for the Hollow kind of approaching, and then Ichigo sort of having a very nice kind of straight arc line to it. I love that Ichigo's, you could maybe track it. Ichigo's sword is drawn with incredibly inconsistent length to it, I think. Uh, and obviously the hilt detail we lose from time to time. I don't think the hilt's particularly drawn very well here of his Zanpakuto. But nevertheless, I do love this panel. I think it's a pretty effective panel. He knocks this Hollow back and away. And I love that, Don Kanoji insists, like, hey, why didn't you run? Which I love that that's his priority, right? And we really get this clashing of personalities. Is Don Kanoji insists that he can't run away, right? That he's maybe a bit more noble than maybe we've come to expect, because we've really been seeing him through the eyes of Ichigo. Especially we've been seeing him as a charlatan, this kind of person that's making a buck off of spiritual nonsense. But clearly he's interacting. He's willing to fight this monster to even protect these people. So like he's facing this sort of threat that very clearly he hasn't faced before, but he's like willing to kind of lay his life on the line. And I love, he cannot run away. And Ichigo just can't can't even grok that mentality from Kanoji, because he just didn't. Not that like Ichigo can't understand not running away from a fight, but he can't understand why Don Kanoji wouldn't, right? This guy of all people. And I love, Ichigo with the big silhouette of this Hollow behind him. It's always easy to think of this Hollow as pretty small, but clearly it's like got a few heads on Ichigo. It's a pretty large creature. It's one of the things with Hollows is like they're often hunched over. They're often shown kind of in some diminutive ways, but I think that like typically they tend to be much larger than people and have a pretty imposing, intimidating figure. Otherwise, they're like really large ghouls. It's great stuff. But yeah, I love it launching forward. We get these reaction shots. It's unclear what's happening here as we, of course, anticipatingly turn to the next page. And I love that we get this shot of Karen very clearly seeing Ichigo and Don Kanoji facing off against this Hollow. Clearly, Ichigo is full forward with his sword, his hand drawn maybe a bit clumsily here. Don't know exactly what's going on there with his arm. Assumably, he's holding the sword forward to kind of put weight and pressure onto it as this Hollow is trying to bat it aside. I love just the visual of Ichigo and Don Kanoji fighting together. It feels like an RPG team of like a warrior and some sort of wizard. Maybe the next time I play a tabletop RPG, I'll play some sort of, maybe I'll play a cleric even. But I don't know, cleric you actually had to be devoted to a serious actual entity. I'll play maybe a sorcerer, but I'll definitely roll him as this sort of televangelist asshole. Because that's how I've been kind of voicing Don Kanoji's lines, in this sort of televangelist kind of stylization. When going into this series, I didn't think that I would be giving characters, more specific voices. I kind of want to stay close to my own voice with slight inflections. I also don't voice the sound effects, but let me know, what your take on that is, what you prefer listening to. Because, the rereading is obviously, it's for you. I don't have to read it aloud for myself. It's just a bit of fun. Anyway. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, obviously, Karen can perceive, because that was something that was asked before, right? It was very clearly like, this idea of like, okay, you can see spirits. Well, can you see hollows? Can you see soul reapers? Is there like tiers of distinction? And I love that we get more of that here, like with Chad squinting, same thing with Tatsuki seeing, a blurry shape, where they can kind of make out the outlines of Ichigo and then even less so the hollow. And so I think the idea is that, hollows are maybe the hardest to perceive. Soul Reapers maybe not quite as hard. I don't know. But yeah, as these characters start to kind of develop some perception, clearly, Chad earlier in the series couldn't even perceive hollows. So it's a neat moment where we get to see these other characters sort of developing this spiritual awareness. And I love that Orihime, we get this shot of her, and then an immediate shot of Ichigo, and it's very clear that Orihime sees Ichigo very clearly. I think this sells that really, really well, especially with Ichigo aligned the way that he is on that panel. Um, and yeah, we end the chapter yet again on Kisuke being quite ominous, and saying just as I thought. So he had certain thoughts on maybe how this would turn out, or parts about maybe how things would go. And then this question of what will you do now, and it's unclear exactly if he's intending that towards Ichigo or if that's for Rukia or another character. I think the idea is that we're supposed to assume that this is kind of directed towards Ichigo. But another kind of great, really really effective drawing of Kisuke here, very close up of the face, sort of expression. Um, yeah, I love the way that his hair is rendered out. I really like the little groove of the hat and how that gets expressed here with the way that the kind of the dark line, the lip of it having that little highlight to it. Just like really subtle kind of stuff that obviously there's more technically proficient mangaka out there. Look no further than the guy that does One Punch Man and I Shall 21. I'm trying to remember that artist's name, but very very impressive, sort of detailed work. But I don't know. There's something to be said too about really depicting something stylized in an effective manner, and I think Bleach pulls that off more so than maybe a lot of other manga. Bleach tends to have, I say tends to have, pretty good fundamentals as far as what would I say? Anatomy. Like you especially see Kubo sense of anatomy grow throughout the entire series. But it's interesting to kind of chart the ways in which these characters get depicted and how they really kind of are shown artistically. I think a lot of stuff stylistically stays the same throughout. It's just making better use of it. Anyway, that's all we get. I like that, we have the security coming down on Rukia, who we haven't seen for most of this chapter outside of, whenever she was telling Ichigo to look up. But yeah, that's it for this chapter. All in all, I like this chapter a lot. It's doing a lot of the things that I appreciated that last chapter did. I think the biggest highlight moment for this chapter is, of course, the hollow forming. That's just a really cool sequence. It's incredibly visceral and interesting, but this gives us a lot more of really seeing kind of Kisuke's involvement here, which is neat, as well as a few other elements, especially kind of the interplay between Ichigo and Don Kanoji, and the two of them facing off against this newly kind of minted hollow, which assumably isn't that strong of an entity, but the issue here is more Ichigo is fighting in a protective manner instead of being able to one-on-one kind of, just bust it down. Anyway, that's it for this chapter. If I pointed out anything that you didn't notice, feel free to give the video a like, if I'm bringing these kind of new ideas to you. But if you notice something I didn't, I'd like you to let me know in the comments. That's always something I'm always interested in learning more and seeing what other people see in this. So if there's anything that you'd like to talk about, definitely leave that in the comments. I'd love to engage with you there. But without further ado, let us get into the foreshadowing for the chapter, how this connects to later chapters visually as well as, narratively, right? because there are certain visual motifs that get expressed and used forward as well that aren't just narrative kind of bits of foreshadowing. This sort of intrusion onto the mortal realm from spirits is interesting, and we won't see very much of that until Eisen and the Fate Kark are a town, but it's kind of cool that we get a little bit of that here. This is a kind of neat moment, right? That we get confirmation that, from Rukia, of course. And I love that she's pulling out her phone, and I assume this is Ishida again, because it's the same shirt and some dark hair, though the jawline and all of that maybe doesn't match up, and we don't get the glasses that really lets us tell, as well as the other bit of hair fringe. But certainly this person looking directly at Rukia, maybe we're meant to perhaps read that as Uryu. Anyway, nice butt. Anyway, yeah, the idea of, whenever a hole vaporizes, the instant becomes a hollow, recomposes in a new location, right? Could appear a long way from here, but, if its regrets are tied to here, the location's going to be here, right? But thinking about especially connecting to the moment where Ichigo is undergoing his hollowification a little bit later, Tessai has them all bound up, but, isn't the whole idea that he would reform somewhere else? So I gotta assume that the binding spells that Tessai uses later keeps the spirit from recomposing elsewhere. I guess I gotta figure there's maybe something going on there. I don't remember exactly how all that part gets written whenever he gets thrown down the shaft and everything. But it is interesting to think about, nevertheless. I don't think we really see any other characters undergo hollowification, really. I'm trying to think if there's any, we see a character end up becoming a hollow at any point, but I don't think that's the case. Anyway, yeah, in the hollow, I really love the way that this forms. Of course, the mask shooting out the way that it does is fantastic stuff, and we'll get more of those visuals with Ichigo later, which is cool. So it's neat to get that here, very explicitly, so that whenever we see Ichigo undergoing it, it's kind of a revisit of a lot of these visuals, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think of if there's really anything else that I want to speak towards here. Obviously, I like that I think it is pretty cool. Don Kanoji kind of insisting upon himself here, and being the kind of heroic figure. I think I kind of wanted a little bit more of that with Yawak, Yuhabak, or however you want to pronounce his name, the Quincy King, right? I wanted, because he certainly ends up pretty much being a cackling villain by the end of all of that. But there was, at the very least, the beginning of that arc, there felt like there was a little bit more of this self-righteousness to him, and this sense that he was really doing this real sort of returning the world the way it should be, and that he very much was the protagonist of his own story, right? And then he wanted to kind of flex that outwardly, and that ended up being the sort of charisma that drew all these other Quincy to him, that helped him form the Vandenreich. And I see a little bit of that in the way in which Don Kanoji operates, ironically enough. I mean, they both have cool big black capes, right? But the idea of there being this character that maybe has a different understanding of the world, imperfect as it is, it's interesting that, of course, Yawak's understanding of the world is more true to form than any of the other characters that we've gotten. That he knows the idea of there being, a singular realm rather than the realms divided into three, as they are multifaceted as they are. the spirit realm, Hueco Mundo, and the mortal realm, right? That it was all one at some point. But kind of interesting that, Don Kanoji very much is this very charismatic figure that believes himself to be really kind of this protagonist, right? This sort of infallible, I can't run sort of figure. So I don't know. I was hoping to see maybe a little bit more of that. Of course, a lot of the antagonists of Bleach, we get some much more like it's hard to see Aizen as anything but villainous, especially as he's villain monologuing and doing the things he does. But you get the sense that at the very least there is maybe a little bit of Aizen really feeling as though what he's doing is just in the grand scheme of things. And certainly to an extent, Genjo trying to get his own powers back and maybe rebel against Soul Society in a way is its own thing. So it's interesting to think about that sort of villain thinking that they are the hero of their own story mentality, and that we get a little bit of that, a little taste of that here with Don Kanoji. It would be interesting if we got an antagonist. I guess we get Genjo, who butts up with Ichigo and kind of ends up becoming sort of allied with him for a little bit, but obviously it ends up all being a deception. But I kind of like this interplay between, the actual protagonist of the story as well as this sort of pretend protagonist, this other character who sees themselves as a protagonist, even though we know from context that they really aren't. And I think to a degree, maybe Yawak plays with that, where we know he's very clearly the villain of that final arc, but at the same right, like he doesn't see himself perhaps that way. Um, yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Anyway, and I think structurally this kind of starts to set that up, right? That there are these sort of other characters that very much see themselves in these protagonist positions. Yet again, we get kind of note of Tatsuki becoming more spiritually aware that gets nothing done with, sadly enough. But I like that, we get that dichotomy of characters and what they're seeing there. This moment, I absolutely think this is Urahara talking about but about Ichigo, right? That this is, he expected this hollow. Whenever he says "just as I thought," I think the whole point is that he was waiting to see how things would develop with this hollow because he expected this hollow to form. But I like how he says, "But it's terrible. So what will you do now?" I think that is speaking towards kind of, okay, Ichigo, how are you going to handle this situation, right? And maybe in a lot of ways is sort of testing Ichigo, the fiber of his character to see how he can push Ichigo moving forward throughout the series. So it's interesting. We already get a little bit of Urahara scheming and kind of having control over the situation. Obviously, he brought his spirit cane. Why would you bring your spirit cane and knock people out of their bodies unless you were planning to use it on the single person in all of Karakura town? I guess you could use it on Ishin, right? But clearly showed up to do this with Ichigo, and to really put Ichigo in this position. And to what end, right? We have to ask ourselves. And like I said, I think it's merely more of his sort of schemes and machinations and using Ichigo as his own personal pawn in this larger story. And so, in a lot of ways, this arc, which is easy to really think about, like this arc of just being like, oh, this is the arc with Don Kanoji, like whatever. It introduces Don Kanoji. It's insubstantial, but there's so much little stuff going on that I didn't remember about, like all these other characters and really showing them off and showing their connection to Ichigo. That Chad moment we had the previous chapter, so on and so forth. But one that I really didn't remember is seeing, very, very clearly how much Urahara is invested in Ichigo's growth and in cultivating Ichigo, to clearly his own ends, right? So that's neat. But that's about all I have to say for this chapter. So shorter one. Wanted to do a little bit of a shorter one. I know the last couple have been running long, so hoping to keep it concise. I didn't, have as much to say or ramble about this time, so that helps. But as always, I do appreciate you listening to the whole of this. Thank you for getting through another one of these and joining us for yet another episode of Bleach Revisited. Thank you so much. As always, you can support me through more engagement with the video, sharing it with people your friends, other Bleach fans, all of that. Otherwise, I've got the Twitter, I've got the Patreon. Feel free to support me there as you feel comfortable. But all in all, thank you so much for giving this your time. Hopefully, I pointed out some new things to you that you might not have recognized. Hopefully, I've enriched this reading for you. And if I haven't, let me know. Let me know what I could do better. I do want this to grow and really be a positive product. Though this will always be unscripted. Anyway, this has been Karakuri Gold. As always, spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.